The events in the cabin. I had a guest waiting for me when I returned to my cabin after finishing my evening meal in the dining room. Because the so-called guard posted at your cabin door had just let your killer pass, you mean? Apparently, Gregson told the crewman he was a police inspector, which was the truth, of course. He wouldn't have had his identification with him, though. He had his trench coat and mustache, not to mention the bag of chips. I imagine the crewman was convinced. But the man accompanying him would have had two swords slung around his waist. You mean me? Who else? Yes, that's true. You would have hoped the sight of a few swords might have set off alarm bells in the guards' heads. The point is, I left the cabin before its occupant returned and I immediately disembarked the ship. Certainly, all I can tell you is that only the inspector was waiting for me when I arrived back at my cabin. And you entered without any inkling of suspicion? That's right, none whatsoever. When I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me. Obviously, you're talking about Inspector Gregson. Yes, though at the time I didn't know the man's name, and there was no time for introductions. I value my life over manners. By which you mean, the inspector was there to assassinate you, I suppose? That was certainly the impression given by the gun pointing in my direction. But I've never seen the muzzle of a revolver shake about so much in all my life. Anyone would think the man had never shot somebody before. Believe it or not, most of us haven't. Anyway, there was no time to call for the help of the crewman at the door, so I dealt with the man myself. I took the gun from his hand and shot him point blank. No, okay. I soon took care of him with an ippon sui throw, though. He couldn't wait to run away after that. Hold it! Even though the man had a gun? That was a very brave move, wasn't it? Ha 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 ha! My ippon sui is far faster than a bullet, I can assure you. But surely all that commotion caused the crewman to come in, didn't it? Yes, of course. He burst in immediately without knocking. The inspector hurled himself at the stocky fellow, and then just managed to slip past him to make his escape. The outstanding guard does it again. Luckily, there aren't many situations I can't get out of using a quick ippon sui throw. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. It has nothing to do with his murder. The crown snapped off and the glass covering the face of the watch was cracked. Preferable to the man's head being pulled off or his spine cracking, wouldn't you say? Not that the man was spared for long. A bullet to the chest soon saw to that. But the point is, the broken pocket watch doesn't prove that a murder took place. Absolutely not. All the watch proves is the power of my jujitsu throw. Whatever you say, it doesn't quite ring true that no shot was fired in that cabin. Because there was an obvious bullet hole in the wall. What are you talking about? That's what the star of your low-brow detective stories told you, is it? Well, I don't care for such fiction. Haven't you worked it out yet, you little stripling? No murder took place in my cabin. The inspector was clearly killed having returned to Britain because his body was found in London. But there's no evidence that proves the victim ever returned to London alive. Just take a moment to think that idea of yours through now, stripling. What? If the inspector was killed on the steamship in France, How on earth could he have got back to Britain? When people die, their bodies remain at that same spot. It's a devil of a thing. Well, then, obviously the culprit must have moved the body. How exactly? Carrying a corpse off a ship in your arms would raise a few eyebrows at least, don't you think? Well, yes, that's true, but all passenger luggage is inspected when it's unloaded from arriving vessels, and I would like to think that the border police would carry the corpse of an English gentleman as hand luggage. If the murder had taken place aboard the ship, you would imagine the body would have been disposed of at sea. There would be no sense in risking being caught by attempting to transport the body back to Britain. Oh, that's killed that idea then. But perhaps not. Mrs. Hara? We've heard that the first-class passengers were under constant scrutiny by the crewmen posted to guard them, which would mean that the culprit had no opportunity to dispose of the body in the sea. Yes, that's true. So transporting the body to Britain may have been the only viable alternative. Dear me, you really are new to this, aren't you? I thought I'd been perfectly clear, but it seems I'm going to have to explain it in words you can understand. I think I ought to alter my testimony with your consent, of course, my lord. I have no objection. State your amended testimony now. There is no possible way I could have transported the victim's corpse back to Britain.
Hold it!
There's an idea. Think about it, Stripling. All passengers and crew disembarked at the same time and passed through the same checks at the border. The symposium guests were then driven straight to the hotel in carriages organized by the ministry. And we met you as soon as you arrived in the hotel. So you did? Well then, remind me, did I have a corpse over my shoulder at the time? What? No. So we're in agreement then. I couldn't possibly have brought the inspector's body back to Britain. Unless of course they've developed some clever device these days to instantly move things from A to B. Funny you should say that. Professor Hairbrain's invention didn't actually work, if you remember, Mr. Naruhodo. Yeah, of course. Events has become unusually quiet, I notice. Yes, because there's really nothing more to say. So that's his story? Well, I suppose if you think about it, whenever you drop a teacup in the office and it breaks, we don't say, Mr. Naruhodo must have been murdered there, do we? Is that a veiled threat about what might happen to me if I break another one? The fact is that Inspector Gregson's body was found in the little room on Fresno Street. If he really was killed in Judge Ikuku's cabin, the body would have to have been moved somehow, obviously. Transporting a dead body over a country border, that would be impossible for the majority of people. So there must have been some special circumstances that made it possible for the culprit then. That could be a vital realization, I think, Mr. Naruhodo. Yeah. But I know what it is, I think, but I don't know how to prove it. I remember Mikotoba saying that Judge Jigaku didn't have to go through inspections like everyone else because of his special status. So that is the thing that I have to show here. But how do I prove that? How do I prove his status? The identification? Is that the case? No, that's a different case. Is it? I mean, if you flip it like that. Okay, maybe not, but This is the only close thing, I think. Let's give it a shot.
Objection.
There is no possible way you could have moved Inspector Gregson's body, you say? I would say the opposite is true. And what's that supposed to mean? Far from being impossible for you to do, the transporting of Inspector Gregson's body back to Britain is something only you could do. What are you talking about, Rinnosuke? As well as being a judge, Mr. Jikaku is also Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, which means he is exempt from having his luggage searched when he enters the country. We learned that when we first met you upon your arrival in London.
Well, all those passport checks and luggage searches at the border took rather a lot of time. I must say I am very envious of your ministerial status. You didn't have to go through any of that, did you?
Ah, I knew you were jealous. I presume you recall this, Judge Jikaku? It's a photograph we took in the foyer of the hotel to mark the occasion. As the court will note, you have with you your large travel trunk. Large enough, in fact, to have a corpse inside.
Mr. Naruhodo,
Surely you're not suggesting... I'm afraid I am, yes. 3 days ago, when we were chatting innocently with the new arrivals from Japan in the hotel, the body of Inspector Gregson was just meters away from us, inside Judge Jikaku's trunk.
Order in the court. I am skeptical, counsel, that a grown man's body could fit inside even the largest travel trunk.
It could. Because I happen to know that the witness himself, a man of considerable size, fits inside his trunk. And verifying that would be extremely simple, wouldn't it, Judge Jikaku?
But inside his trunk? How horrifying.
And after we'd spoken with you at the Great Waterloo Hotel, you had the opportunity to visit the apparent scene on Fresno Street, taking your trunk with you in a cab to deposit the inspector's body.
I don't have to listen to this nonsense.
Dr. Guri, the coroner who examined the body, has confirmed the possibility. She's acknowledged there are signs that steps may have been taken to disguise the true time of death. The onset of the body's decomposition could have been delayed by storing it in a refrigerator.
Counsel, as I remember explaining yesterday, refrigerators of the requisite size are few and far between.
Yes, I'm sure they are. But one place they're certainly found is on large ocean liners. Such ships are equipped with electrically refrigerated cold rooms to keep food fresh on their long sea voyages. And the SS Grouse is no exception. Professor Makatoba told me about it only yesterday. Well, Judge Jikaku? However much you prolong this debate, you can't eliminate the truth. All the evidence points to you being the killer.
Well, this is all very heartening. I can see that it was a wise move, letting Asogi and you embark on this study tour.
What are you talking about now?
Logical reasoning, of course. All court proceedings will be built on logical reasoning in the new century. And I can see that you have both laid firm foundations for that already.
Judge Jikaku, please, stop diverting attention from the issue at hand. The defense has made an accusation against you. How do you respond?
Respond? There's really no need for me to respond, is there?
Why ever not? Because before you can even begin to answer the question of when the victim was killed, you must first establish one key fact. Where was the victim killed? It's quite logical.
The actual scene of the crime?
The prosecution's stance is unaltered. The killing took place on Fresno Street when the gunshot was heard, as the accused Barak Van Zeek shot the victim at point-blank range. Since no tangible evidence exists to disprove the prosecution's claim at this time, the defense's deductions amount to little more than an elaborate fairy tale. I'm afraid that's how the logical reasoning the British are known for really works, young stripling. The victim was shot in that little room on Fresno Street and died instantly. I'm afraid it's the prosecution's claim. That's the only fairy tale here. How can you say that? Quite simply, because that claim directly contradicts a certain piece of evidence in our possession. Very tantalizing, counsel. I think you had better explain yourself to the court, don't you? The prosecution claims that Inspector Gregson died instantly when he was shot at the scene on Fresno Street. But this evidence clearly contradicts that claim. Died instantly. Something that contradicts him dying instantly. The fact that the watch stopped at 5? I'm gonna go with that, I guess. The watch.
Take that!
The Japanese really are a curious breed, to proffer an argument with such conviction, only to present such nonsensical evidence. Perhaps my Japanese friend's inexplicable thinking is why people talk of the mystique of the East. In case you hadn't noticed, I'm not the only Japanese around here. Do you even have a mirror? The court is not interested in the mystique of anything. You will be penalized accordingly. Was the victim killed in the room on Fresno Street, or was he moved there after his death? There's one piece of evidence we have that shows the answer to that question surprisingly clearly. Perhaps you should try to present the correct one this time then, Mr. Naruhodo. Are you going to try again, or can't you hold your hand steady enough to point it out? The prosecution claims that Inspector Gregson died instantly when he was shot at the scene on Fresno Street, but this evidence clearly contradicts that claim. I'm just gonna consult the wiki and see what's going on. Oh, come on, that's weak. That's weak, man. Fine, okay. Okay, alright, fine. It's a bit of a stretch for me, I don't know. Alright, so if he was shot and died instantly, he wouldn't have curled up like that. Him being curled up like that suggests that he was dumped on the floor. Really? Come on, he could have fallen. I mean, there could be many explanations to why he was curled up. But, you know, whatever. A photograph of the victim in the very location you claim he wasn't killed? Yes, but the point is the posture of the body itself. Look, if Inspector Gregson had been shot there in that room, it's out of the question that his body would have been curled up in a ball like that. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but your logic is flawed. He could easily have adopted that fetal position due to the pain of the shot, which subsequently proved fatal. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Judge Yugiko, but it's your logic that is flawed. What? According to this autopsy report, the victim died instantly. He would have felt no pain, much less have been able to draw himself into that position.
which begs the question of why the victim's body is curled up in that way. Though the answer should be abundantly clear by now.
You're suggesting...
The inspector's body took on that posture ahead of its arrival on Fresno Street before it was coldly turned out on the floor from the inside of a large travel trunk.
No! You're quite right. The shape of the body, it looks exactly as if it had been kept in a confined space. No, it doesn't.
Judge Ikuku, present your trunk for examination. I believe it's very possible that it will contain traces of the victim's blood.
Oh! Present my trunk. I refuse.
What? On what grounds?
I am the Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Empire of Japan. I shouldn't have to put up with this treatment just because of some stripling's baseless accusations. In other words, Judge Ikuku, there is blood in your trunk. I decline to answer that. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have
At this moment, you're not a government minister. You are a witness in a trial in Britain's highest court. I don't care who you are or what your status outside this courtroom might be. You will not withhold information. Nothing is more important than the truth.
Hold on, court. Well, Mr. Jigsaw, what's it to be?
You can't be serious. You did it? Have you no shame at all, Kazuma Asogi?
What?
Very well, I admit it. I did bring the inspector's body into the country. Inside my trunk, exactly as postulated by the defense.
What? You...
Dear God, outrageous.
So it was you. You admit to inspect...
No, I admit to nothing more than what I have said. Of killing the man, I certainly have no recollection.
What on earth is that cryptic statement supposed to mean?
I merely disposed of the inspector's body, which was left in my cabin, in order to avoid unwanted attention. As the judicial assistant over there pointed out, I had no chance to throw it in the ocean. So, I decided my only option was to bring it to Britain with me and dispose of it somewhere else.
You can't still deny it. If you didn't do it, then who on earth did kill the man?
As you know, there was one other person in my cabin that night. He had the opportunity. And moreover, he'd already accepted the mission to take the inspector's life. Oh, that's right. Who else could it have been? It was you, Kazuma Asogi. You.
Trauma. I never thought you'd stoop to this, Shishiro Jigugu.
You have taken the words straight out of my mouth, Prosecutor Kazuma Asogi. You thought by leaving the body in my cabin you could pin the crime on me, did you?
Well, the prosecution counsel has already admitted to visiting the witness's cabin on the night in question.
Yes, on an assassination mission, no less. You wouldn't. So, what do you make of that, young stripling? You've heard my testimony now, and that's all I have to say on the matter. I'll admit to nothing more. I don't believe this.
Counsel for the defense, what is your position now? The court awaits your response to the witness's assertion. The assertion that on the night in question, the victim's assailant was in fact Mr. Kazuma Asogi.
This isn't the dead end it seems to be. The answer's right in front of me. It comes down to Jiguku. or Kazuma. Both of them had the opportunity to kill Gregson, but only one of them did it. And I'm just a step away from proving who. Very well, the defense is ready to respond to the assertion put forward by Judge Jigaku. The idea that the victim's murder could have been committed by Prosecutor Asogi is... Judge Jigaku, let me remind you of something you said only a few minutes ago. You claim that logical reasoning is the future of judicial process.
It is. No question.
Well, logical reasoning can prove something here. Namely, that it would have been impossible for Prosecutor Asogi to commit the crime.
What? The court will only accept an argument that is supported by compelling evidence. So present what you have, counsel. What proof is there that allegedly demonstrates the impossibility of Prosecutor Asogi's involvement?
Awkward. I didn't think I have to prove anything. What a dummy. How stupid I was. So, is this the right answer or not? Let me just check. Okay, I am on the right path. Where is the proof that Kazuma wasn't there? Where is it? 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 Where This again? This itinerary for crew members of the SS Grouse, my lord. This is conclusive proof.
An itinerary? How does that prove anything?
Judge Jigaku, the moment you acknowledge that you found the victim's body in your cabin, this itinerary suddenly became much more significant.
What? Why?
On the night in question, as always, a crewman sentry was on guard outside your cabin door. As long as he was there, nobody could have fired a shot inside the cabin. Absolutely, because it's inconceivable that the guard wouldn't have heard it and come to investigate. So that tells us that the crime must have taken place when the guard was elsewhere. And that narrows it down to the 20 minutes just after 10 o'clock, as indicated on the itinerary.
Yes, I see no flaw in your reasoning so far.
But the crucial point is this. When the evacuation drill took place, the steamship had already put to sea from the port of Dunkirk. Now, clearly the murder could only have been committed by somebody who was aboard the vessel at the time. But Prosecutor Asogi stated in yesterday's proceedings, I didn't come to Great Britain to take anyone's life, so I left Gregson and disembarked the ship. I spent that night at a boarding house in the town, and returned to England the following morning. Which I'm sure the court will agree is conclusive proof that Kazuma Asogi couldn't possibly have carried out the killing.
No, absolutely not. I don't accept that at all.
What do you mean?
The boy's just saying that to exonerate himself. We can't trust that he really disembarked the vessel. Obviously, after he left my cabin, he hid himself somewhere nearby on the ship. Just waiting for his sons to come back and...
No, that's out of the question. Isn't it, Kazuma? As the defense rightly recalls, I disembarked the vessel and spent the night in a boarding house in Dunkirk. And as I said yesterday, I signed my name in the accommodations register book. All extremely easy to verify and undeniable proof.
No,
There's no escape this time. You can forget that you're a judge or a government minister. It's time you gave the court an honest answer, as a common man. You killed Inspector Gregson and transported his corpse back to Britain. Then you dumped the body in the room on Fresno Street and made it look as if the murder had happened there. That's what really happened, isn't it, Shichiro Jikaku?
It was that damned trial 10 years ago. That's when all this began. Looking back now, my fate was decided that day. I was doomed already. It's over. My life is over. A British assassin to eliminate a professor in Japan. A Japanese assassin to eliminate a detective in Britain. Both assassins will use diplomatic immunity to evade conviction and return safely to their homelands. The assassin exchange request arrived from Britain about 1 year ago. Though it was hardly a request, it was a demand.
And for that, you decided to recruit Mr. Asogi.
But things didn't go according to plan.
Oh, but things didn't go according to plan. Your chosen assassin never made it to Britain. And you found yourself unable to dispatch a replacement. Because I was already on my way to Britain at that time in Cosmos Place.
And that left me with only one option for carrying out my obligation. To eliminate the mark myself, personally. Of course, there was but a single opportunity for me to do that.
The International Forensic Science Symposium, I presume.
That's right. I decided it would be safest to carry out the plan before my arrival in Britain. So I enlisted the help of my British counterpart. And made arrangements for a pretext that would take the inspector to Dunkirk. To lure the man in, he was given a sham mission by the Reaper.
What? The Reaper? But there's only one person who could have done that. The mastermind of the entire operation. The Reaper himself. So that means that the assassin exchange was all planned by the Reaper.
I am not at liberty to say anything about my British counterpart. Anyway, the inspector accepted the Reaper's mission and dutifully infiltrated my cabin on the steamship. But it was all a trap designed to lead him to France, and his own death. Oh, how awful. It was past 9 o'clock when I returned to my cabin from the dining hall that evening. I didn't give him time to attack me. I choked him until he lost consciousness. But there was a guard just outside the door, so I left it at that for the time being. Even the slightest noise might have aroused suspicion, so I bided my time waiting.
For the 20 minutes after 10 o'clock.
I had intended to finish him by strangulation, but moments before I had the chance, he suddenly came round and went for me in a reckless move. I'd received the British issue gun 16 years earlier, being a member of the judiciary as a visiting student. I never imagined I'd have to use it for something like that.
So, the revolver belongs to you, does it?
Then the victim was killed inside your cabin on the SS Grouse. Which begs the question of why you arranged for his body to be discovered in the room on Fresno Street.
The young judicial assistant over there has already answered that question. There was no way I could take the body on deck to throw it over the side. That's precisely where all the crewmen were gathered for the evacuation drill.
So, before the first-class cabin sentries return, I took the corpse to the refrigeration room.
And then on arriving in Dover, you concealed the body in your trunk in order to smuggle it past the border police.
I knew I needed to take steps if the police were to be convinced when the body was found in London.
In that case, you must have known. You must have had intimate details of Inspector Gregson's intended schedule.
Yes, my British counterpart sent me everything I needed to know. The inspector was due at Fresno Street at 5 o'clock that afternoon, in order to meet a man by the name of Hugh Boone, from whom he would take back his police identification. I decided that man would be the perfect person to set up as the culprit. So I took a hackney carriage over there with the body still in my trunk.
That must have been just after we took this photograph with you at the hotel then.
Yes, I wasn't expecting a welcoming committee. I was more than a little nervous. On Fresno Street, I spotted a young girl selling little firecrackers.
Miss Venus, of course.
I conceived of the candle trick there and then. So I donned the simple disguise and approached the girl to buy enough firecrackers to replicate a gunshot.
What sort of disguise?
For some reason, the inspector had a bright red hairpiece in his own traveling case. So I put that on, although I suspect I drew more attention to myself in that than I would have otherwise.
The hairpiece we found at the scene. The inspector had it ready for the Red-Headed League investigation.
I only arrived at the room at around 4:45. So I quickly placed the body on the floor, moved the notice board, and set up my little candle trick. I arranged it so the firecrackers would go off with a bang around 15 minutes later.
So that Mr. Boone, who was due to arrive at 5, would walk straight into a trap.
Except at the last moment, I made a careless blunder.
What was that? I imagine it was the bag of fish and chips.
I didn't notice that it had fallen out of his overcoat pocket when I moved the body to the refrigeration room. I put it back into his pocket the following morning, but... well, it seems the warmth of the heated cabin had accelerated the decay of the fish. Anyway, that's everything. All the sordid details of what I did. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I come to talk with...
I've heard enough. We've arrived at the truth about the murder of one of the country's most capable and respected police inspectors. The witness will be tried in the coming days. For a crime of such a vile nature, you could accept the most severe penalty.
An exchange of assassins. What a foolhardy idea. Mr. Jigaku, one last detail. Who was your counterpart in Britain? Who was the mastermind behind the assassin exchange? Nothing you say now can make matters any worse for you. Just tell us.
Enough! I've already told you that I cannot say.
Even though as things stand, you may very well never set foot in your homeland again.
What are you waiting for? Can't we get this over with now? It's finished. All of it. I am finished.
Then, in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I now pronounce the findings of this court. This man before us has admitted to the willful murder of Tobias Gregson. Cicero Jigaku, it is the opinion of this court that you should be found guilty. And may I remind all those present of the strict confidentiality demanded by this closed court.
Alright then. Time to go home.
Moments ago, Mr. Jigaku signed a written confession, admitting to the murder of Inspector Gregson and the subsequent conveyance of the body. In short, the defendant's innocence has therefore been established beyond doubt.
Oh, wonderful. Well done, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, thank you. Is something wrong? I'm just a little troubled by his silence.
The true identity of the Reaper of the Bailey and this extraordinary assassin exchange. We do remain in the dark about these mysteries. However, insofar as the indictment brought against the defendant in this trial, we have reached a conclusion. I have every intention of pursuing both mysteries as a prosecutor. As you wish. Now for the formal adjudication. I hereby declare the defendant Barak Van Zieks.
Objection!
The prosecution calls for adjudication to be deferred.
Counsel?
The accused's innocence hasn't been fully established at all, and therefore it would be wrong to deliver a verdict at this time. That is the prosecution's unwavering position.
What?
But Judge Jigaku has already confessed. Nevertheless, Barak Van Zieks has committed crimes for which he must be punished.
Well, it would appear you have information that the court needs to hear, Prosecutor Asogi.
Certainly, the murder of Inspector Gregson was actually carried out by Cicero Jigaku, but it's clear from the witness's testimony that he was coerced into complying with the plot, into this sick, merciless assassin exchange. That may be true, but... So what I want to know is, who coerced Jigaku? Who was pulling the strings? The victim went to France having been ordered on a mission for the Reaper, only to be murdered. In other words, the mastermind behind the assassin exchange is someone in a position to give such an order. As we have already established, the Reaper himself.
Well, certainly, that would appear to follow.
The prosecution hereby formally accuses the man in the dock, Barak Van Zieks, of being the Reaper of the Bailey, and furthermore, I'm going to prove his guilt beyond all reasonable doubt.
What? Order! Reaper of the Bailey is a long-standing mystery, Counsel. Are you suggesting you have some new information with which to build a case?
Scotland Yard has already investigated Lord Van Zieks very thoroughly in that regard, and they found no evidence whatsoever to substantiate the claim that he is the Reaper. Perhaps, but circumstances have now changed. What do you mean? It's already been established that the assassin exchange was negotiated with Jigaku by the Reaper himself, which means we now have a new line of questioning by which to identify definitively the man's identity. That is the prosecution's intention here.
I must say I'm surprised by quite how tenaciously you appear to want to besmirch my name.
You are guilty of an unforgivable crime, Lord Van Zieks, and I will bring you to justice for it, whatever it takes. That explains Kazuma's silence before. He'll stop at nothing to finish what Lord Van Zieks unwittingly started 10 years ago.
Very well. Whilst it's extremely irregular, I will on this occasion grant the prosecution further opportunity for witness testimony. The defendant will disclose any and all involvement he has had with the Reaper and the assassin exchange.
I thank you, my lord, for guiding the court so wisely.
I hereby declare this court to be in session for a supplementary hearing. Look how flexible our court system is. Isn't it wonderful?
Pray turn a blind eye to the discourtesy as I verify that this foul and unremitting accusation hasn't soured the contents of my hollow chalice.
Lord Van Zinks?
I first had to suffer the pseudonym of the Reaper 10 years ago now, and ever since that time I've endured the weight of implied guilt that's gone visit. So I welcome the chance to testify now and crush those allegations once and for all.
Good. Then let justice decide, Lord Van Zinks. The prosecution seeks to begin building its case by calling the accused to the stand as the primary witness, in order that he may answer the accusation brought by the prosecution that he is the Reaper of the Bailey.
And what says the defense?
Putting the defendant in the witness stand can be extremely dangerous, and Kazuma-sama is so emotional at the moment he is not thinking logically. You're right that he is not himself, but I knew it would be like this, and I came here today determined to face him through whatever might rise, as a lawyer and as his friend. Then that's what we must do. The defense has no objection, my lord.
Very well. Defendant, you will take the witness stand and give formal testimony on the subject of your involvement with the Reaper and the assassin exchange.
As you wish, my lord. I've never taken the life of another, nor have I instructed another to kill. I've been investigating the truth behind the Reaper for years, and I was aware of Gregson's involvement. That's the reason why I went to Fresno Street that day, and how I came to discover the body. The point is, no common thread exists between myself, Gregson, and Dr. Wilson. Clearly, therefore, there's no reason to suspect me of being behind the assassin exchange.
So you deny all accusations by the prosecution? Both that you are the Reaper of the Bailey, and that you masterminded the assassin exchange?
I acknowledge that the public at large believe me to be the Reaper. However, that's a fallacy, which I alone am in a position to forswear.
Naturally, the prosecution believes the testimony just given by the accused to be untrue. Rinosuke Naruhodo? Yes? Let me ask you, why are you here? What really brings you to this courtroom? A desire to uncover the truth, even if the truth proves your client to be guilty. From all my experiences in this courtroom, I've come to realize something. The truth can't be hidden. Sooner or later, it will come out. So it's always my intention to work with my client in pursuit of the truth. I want you to remember what you just said.
Enough dilatory chatter. Counsel for the defense, proceed to cross-examine the witness.
Yes, my lord. I know exactly what you're thinking, Kazuma. I know you're just waiting to point it out. The contradiction you're convinced lies somewhere within this man's testimony. Alright. Let's go through this again, shall we?
I've never taken the life of another,
nor have I instructed another to kill.
So you're not what the general public refer to as the infamous Reaper of the Bailey?
Exactly.
Don't imagine for a moment that the court will be satisfied with a one-word answer on this.
I realize that.
If you're intending to comment on every sentence, this could take a while, Kazuma. Didn't you find it disturbing, though, that one by one, defendants who had been acquitted after your unsuccessful prosecution were killed?
Let me answer that question by posing another. If one by one defendants who had been acquitted after your successful defense were killed, would you find that disturbing?
Disturbing? I couldn't possibly say how that would make me feel with a one-word answer like that.
Exactly.
Well, that told me.
But even though I'm not the Reaper, that doesn't mean I ignored all the hearsay. I have been investigating the truth behind the Reaper for years, and I was aware of Gregson's involvement.
You say for years. How long exactly?
Since the very first time the Reaper's influence was felt in this courtroom. 10 years ago now.
And your investigation led you somehow to Inspector Gregson, you're saying?
I didn't want to believe it. He was a personal acquaintance. We'd worked on cases together in the past.
A friend, even?
It felt like a betrayal, but I demanded permission to search his office at the yard without his knowledge.
Which is when you found his secret notebook, is it?
It's when I first learned of the location he'd noted only as grouse, and the appointment at 5 p.m. on the 31st. So I didn't know the significance of those details at the time.
So now we're at the nub of the matter.
As it turns out, the significance for me personally was very unfortunate. That's the reason why I went to Fresno Street that day, and how I came to discover the body.
But why did you go to that specific location?
I thought that if it was the Reaper's headquarters, then by turning up there at 5 o'clock, I would catch whoever was involved red-handed. Sadly, all that was awaiting me was the inspector's corpse.
Yeah, even though it wasn't designed for you, you walked straight into the trap set by Jikuku.
Exactly. Jikuku had intended to implicate Hugh Boone, but unhappily for me, I arrived at the scene first.
Huh, a ridiculously careless blunder. Moved on to just throwing insults around, I see then, Kazuma?
Think what you will, it doesn't change the truth. The point is, no common thread exists between myself, Gregson, and Dr. Wilson.
There's a link between you and Gregson, though.
Of course, we were close acquaintances. We'd worked on numerous cases together. I considered the man to be a mentor of sorts. He taught me a number of important lessons.
He did? Such as what?
Where to buy good fish and chips, and such like.
Well, that was convincing.
Dr. Wilson was a coroner, of course, but that was some time in the past. And in any case, I understand it was several years ago now that he was invited to work at a Japanese university.
That's right. He was a visiting professor at the Imperial Yume University in Tokyo.
It should be unambiguously clear then that no link exists between myself and him. In other words, I had no motive for sending some assassin across the oceans to kill the man.
It sounds plausible enough, and I want to believe it, but something about this just doesn't sit quite right with me.
Clearly, therefore, there's no reason to suspect me of being behind the assassin exchange?
Certainly as it stands, there is no evidence to suggest that you concocted the scheme. But as it stands, we have only the accused's insistence of his innocence. Sorry? Perhaps there is some reason that will explain why he masterminded the assassin exchange. And if a reason could be established later in these proceedings, then the accused's claim that in this testimony that he wasn't involved would amount to perjury. Well, yes, that's true, but clearly Kazuma-sama intends to identify a reason and use it to make his case. So if you don't identify something first, he'll gain the advantage. This could be dangerous. A convincing testimony about Lord Van Zeeks. Certainly, with no apparent connection between the three men, there is no way to establish a motive. The testimony seems unassailable as far as I can see. Oh dear me, what a bleak expression. I agree. There doesn't appear to be any particular link between them at first glance, but with the inclusion of one other person, I must be overthinking it, surely. Another person, Mr. Naruhodo? I need to think back over all the information we've gleaned so far. Alright, and I'll review my notes about the case and all the evidence in the court record. Could it be that Lord Van Zeeks has something to hide after all? Alright, the common thread between all of them has to be this, right?
Objection.
Let's see what happens.
What is this? An autopsy report? Wait, this is 10 years old, from the autopsy of Lord Clint Van Zeeks. What? My brother's autopsy report?
I'm pleased to see the defense doesn't intend to run from the undeniable truth.
Order in court. What reason do you have for presenting a 10-year-old autopsy report here, Counsel?
This, the autopsy report of the professor's final victim, is an indelible link between Inspector Gregson, Dr. Wilson, and the defendant.
Not that accursed name again, the professor!
I personally researched all of the court records relating to that case. I know that at the time autopsy was considered sacrilege to the victim's souls, and for a member of the aristocracy like Lord Clint Van Zeeks, it was unthinkable. But someone implored the powers that be to allow the autopsy to go ahead. Inspector Gregson. He declared that he was certain he would obtain conclusive proof from the procedure. And it was Dr. Wilson who conducted the autopsy. His signature is clearly visible on the document.
As promised by Gregson, the autopsy didn't produce evidence. Evidence that conclusively proved Genshin Asogi was guilty of the murders. In my brother's dying moments, he mustered all his remaining strength to leave that vital clue behind. Indeed, that was the key to indicting the professor for his crimes and the conclusive evidence that convicted him. It enabled Lord Van Zeeks here to avenge his brother's senseless death with a marvelous victory in court.
A marvelous victory, was it? I wonder if that's really true.
What?
Could the same be said if it turned out that the key piece of evidence in question was in fact fabricated? If the inspector, the coroner, and the prosecutor all colluded together to cast an innocent Japanese man as a mass murderer and send him to his death.
That's outrageous!
And now, 10 years later, for some reason the secret has been threatened and needs protecting. Which is why the inspector and the coroner had to be silenced, isn't it? By someone in power in Japan and in Britain. using the 2 killers recruited for the assassin exchange.
Oh boy. Order at once.
10 years ago, my father was convicted in this very courtroom as a mass murderer, to be sentenced to death. But it was all a sham, and I swore to myself that I'd prove it, which is why I had to come to Britain, whatever the cost.
You'll have to forgive me if I feel compelled to toss this vengeful Nipponese's tenacity of purpose here. However, he who fails to quash his emotions in the courtroom has failed as a lawyer.
Come on, Kazuma, you know this won't wash. You're claiming your father was misrepresented in a trial that took place a whole decade ago? You must see that without evidence, that's nothing more than a wild accusation. As it happens, I have evidence. What? As the court has heard, I crossed the channel to France with Gregson on the 31st. I went with him on the pretext of being the assassin recruited to kill Shishiro Jigoku, but my true intentions were to make the inspector tell me the truth.
What truth?
The truth about the evidence, and he acknowledged what I'd already deduced. There's a closely guarded secret about what went on in that autopsy 10 years ago.
What? A secret? I know nothing of any secret.
While we waited for my supposed mark in Jigoku's cabin, I drew my clan's illustrious sword Karama before the inspector's eyes. He very quickly understood what my true motive was.
Right, I see. You that Asagi's young lad, are ya? What? You gonna cut me down with that thing, is that it?
That will very much depend on the answers you give to my next question. I want to know what really happened 10 years ago. The truth, that's all.
Before we get into it, let me make one thing clear. I still believe your father was the professor. There's no doubt in my mind. But unfortunately back then, we didn't have the evidence we needed to make the crime stick.
So, you admit it then? The evidence used in my father's trial was fabricated?
It was for the good of the country. Anyway, I was just following orders.
Orders? What exactly did you do? Speak!
I'm not saying another word.
Even if your life depends on it?
That's right. Even then.
So that's when the tip of the sword broke. Oh, Kazuma-sama. If the results of Clint Van Zeek's autopsy were fabricated, then the investigating officer Gregson and the lead coroner Wilson must have known about it. And they can only have been ordered to pervert the course of justice in that way by one man. The man leading the case for the prosecution, Barak Van Zeeks.
In other words, the defendant did have cause to organize this exchange of assassins.
Exactly, and as was established earlier, it has to have been the Reaper himself who liaised with Jigoku in Japan to arrange the exchange. So it follows that the Reaper's true identity can only be that of the man who stands accused in this courtroom today, Barak Van Zeeks.
Objection!
Kazuma Sogi,
What?
what you just told the court, are you absolutely certain of your facts? Did Gregson really fabricate evidence for that trial 10 years ago?
I heard it with my own ears. His shameful admission.
In that case, I know. The name of the Reaper.
What? Lord Van Zeeks?
I gave no such orders. I know that for certain. Which narrows down the remaining possibilities to one.
If Lord Van Zeeks isn't the one behind all this, then yes, there is only one other person who could have done something like that. I believe I know who it is too. You... I just had a feeling this name was going to come up. The true identity of the infamous Reaper of the Bailey is... Alright, I'm gonna go for it.
Take that!
The only person who could have arranged the assassin exchange and manipulated the autopsy results is the Lord Chief Justice himself, Lord Mail Strongheart. What? Lord Strongheart? Yes, it's true that 10 years ago the defendant handled the prosecution of the professor in court, but he only took over the case after his brother, Lord Clint Van Zeeks, had been killed.
I can only assume that this is the most inappropriate joke in British judicial history.
Well, Lord Van Zeeks?
10 years ago, I was very new to my profession, but I had a burning desire to avenge my brother's death, so I pleaded for control of the case. The investigation to that point, the supplication of the lords to allow my brother's corpse to be examined, all the evidence I was given, the autopsy reports, it all came from you. I've spent my life since then believing I was in your debt for the way you stood aside and let me handle the child. But I see now. I was very much mistaken.
It was a hugely influential force that caused the inspector and the coroner to break the law 10 years ago. And that same force was still felt a decade later on the other side of the world by Shichiro Jigoku. Lord Strongheart, everything falls into place when we recognize that you are the Reaper of the Bailey.
The court awaits your response, my lord. This may very well go down in British judicial history, but I assure you, it is no joke. Consider this a formal accusal by the defense. It doesn't warrant a response. A formal accusal tends to be absurd. The defense's claims are utter nonsense, a wild fancy at best.
You're not gonna defend yourself?
You claim there was some wrongdoings with Lord Clint Van Zeeks' autopsy. That's utterly untrue.
Objection!
But I heard it from Gregson's own lips. He admitted to it.
And where is your evidence?
What?
Gregson's dead now, unless you are thinking of summoning a ghost to the stand.
You mean to say...
I forget how the system works in your little backwater country, but in the courts of the British Empire, without evidence there is no case. I have no intention of entertaining some wild fantasy that can't possibly be substantiated by anyone or anything. Order! Order in the court! Following Inspector Gregson's murder, and in the light of Dr. Wilson's death as well, there is really no one left who could testify about the events of 10 years ago. Is there? So that was the real purpose of the assassin exchange. This court has no business raking over the coals of a case that was concluded a decade ago. The accusal brought by the prosecution and the defense is categorically denied. I take it there are no objections.
Kazuma. He's more or less waited his whole life for this moment. Is there really nothing else we can do now? Is there no other avenue we can go down in pursuit of the truth about what happened all those years ago? If only there was someone who could testify about Clint Van Zeek's autopsy. He's gone to extraordinary lengths to cover his tracks, even so far as dispatching an assassin all the way to Japan to ensure Dr. Wilson's silence. And Dr. Scythe won't say anything against Strongheart. But there's still one ray of hope.
Objection!
Actually, there is one person. One person who could still testify about that autopsy.
Don't be ridiculous. There's no one left.
Who, Renosuke? Who? Tell me. Kazuma, Please, this trial can't end. Not yet. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for the truth. The person the defense would like to call to the stand to testify about the autopsy of Lord Clint Van Zeeks is...
Take that!
Heaven help us. Another Japanese?
An expert in forensic medicine, my lord. Professor Eugen Makitoba. 16 years ago, he came to London with Shichiro Jigaku and Genshin Asogi as a visiting student.
And what could his testimony possibly tell us?
Professor Makitoba was the primary assistant during the autopsy in question. He was also the person who actually penned the report.
Incorrect. The autopsy was carried out by the coroner, Dr. Wilson. The report carries his signature.
It was the primary assistant's duty to keep written record of the coroner's work during the procedure. In actual fact, the coroner merely read over the report at the end and signed it. In other words, Professor Makitoba witnessed the entire autopsy from start to finish. The defense demands that Professor Makitoba be summoned as a witness as a matter of urgency. Whatever really happened in that autopsy laboratory 10 years ago is something only he can tell us.
The defense's demand is denied.
What? But Professor Makitoba is in London at this very moment. We could summon him to the stand in minutes. No, of course he's not going to agree to it. Strongheart has no intention of summoning anyone who knows. He's too concerned about protecting himself.
Prosecutor Asogi, let me refresh your memory, as you seem to have forgotten the prosecution stance. Only minutes ago you accused the defendant of being the Reaper and of masterminding the assassin exchange.
I did, yes.
So present your evidence for those claims and make your case complete.
At this time, I don't have the requisite evidence, but that's exactly why we need witness testimony.
The professor case is closed. There are no clues in the distant past that will bolster your argument today. I'm afraid to say, Prosecutor Asogi, that you would appear to be possessed by the spirit of your late homicidal father. Now, as I stated earlier, this court has already reached a conclusion with respect to the matter at hand. Inspector Gregson was murdered by Japanese Supreme Court Judge Shichiro Jigaku. As for any hidden circumstances that may exist, they will be investigated in due course by the proper authorities.
But we all know what will happen. That'll just give the mastermind of the whole venture time to cover his tracks again.
By which you mean me? Your punishment for this contemptible behavior will be decided at a later date. As for you, Prosecutor Asogi, you will be remanded following these proceedings. Willingly, I trust, since you gave your word. Oh, this futile game of revenge is over, young Master Asogi.
Grrr.
That will be all. I hereby declare this trial to be over. Court is...
Mr. Sholmes?
This is no place for amateur detection, Mr. Sholmes. May I remind you that these proceedings are closed to the general public? You will leave the courtroom at once.
Objection.
Mr. Sholmes was instrumental in the apprehension of Shichiro Jikuku before he fled from Europe. The court should hear what he has to say. Lord Mail Strongheart, it's imperative that you refrain from bringing this trial to an end at this stage.
Is it really? And why would that be?
You need only recall your own words from the opening of the trial to answer that question, if I may. We will stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth behind these disturbing findings. Surely it can't be that the shock of being accused of being the Reaper yourself has erased that from your memory, can it?
The whole truth, sir, has already been uncovered.
It would seem that we have a great many important members of the judiciary present here today. I put it to you, my dear fellows, should the trial end at this juncture? After all, why have you been invited to attend? To nod along to the prevarications of your superiors?
Order! Order in the court!
It seems to me that we stand before a door that leads to a new era of legal practices, a door that is ajar, that has emerged from the shadows of the Reaper's decade-long ascendancy. For you and you alone, my dear fellows, have the power to push this door open now. The auditors in the gallery have no rights to express an opinion on court proceedings. Silence!
He's right. The judge has absolute authority here. Yeah, if he calls the trial to an end, it must end.
What will that really do? I sense dark things occurring behind the scenes. Dark things indeed.
Is there a single person here present who can honestly say, what's... The trial should go on! Summon the witness!
That's right! We need to clear this up before that Japanese fellows...
My lord, you're sure those present that will cover the truth here?
Vindicate yourself of this outlandish accusation.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's the very foundation of British law.
A toast to my dependable colleagues in the gallery.
On with the trial. Testify. Testify.
Testify!
Well, my lord, you hear the voice of British justice, I take it? I think you'll find it will be rather awkward to silence.
The court will recess briefly.
I have no intention of shrinking from these allegations.
Bailiff, arrange for the subpoena of the witness at once. As soon as the gentleman arrives at the courthouse, we shall reconvene.
A recess won't be necessary, my lord.
Pardon?
Makatoba is a close friend of mine. He accompanied me today and is waiting in the antechamber as we speak. I do believe he's been enjoying a little trip down memory lane, in fact. What? Professor Makatoba is here in the courthouse? Mr. Sholmes, you didn't know this would happen, did you? My dear fellow, no one is in a better position to answer that question than you, surely. I wasn't just asking for the fun of it, you know. Don't call me Shirley.
Well, I must thank you for your assistance on this matter, Mr. Sholmes. However, you are of no further use here. Kindly leave the courtroom at once.
But of course, in truth, I find myself rather busy now as a result of these developments. Mr. Naruhodo? Yes? I trust you have Iris's little lucky charm with you? Absolutely. It's still in my pocket. She sends her regards and a reminder. If you find yourself at a dead end, the ears are at your disposal. Just one tug, if you please. Of course.
In that case, the trial will continue without delay. Bailiff, show the witness to the stand.
So it's Lord Strongheart. He's the Reaper of the Bailey. Where exactly is this trial going to take me, I wonder? Just how deep am I about to be plunged into the blackness of the abyss? Well, I'm ready. I'm ready to head into the heart of this maelstrom and confront whatever horrors it tries to drown me under. Because I have the resolve.
To be continued.